And so this should come as no shock to anyone. But a recent study showed that the longer you put your children behind screens or technology or devices, um, the less their vocabulary will be. Is I guess the takeaway behind this. Um, More screen time leads to smaller vocabulary in children. So there is a recent study that's been done that kind of shows increased screen time can lead to smaller vocabularies in kids. This is an interesting one because we like to talk about mind control and conditioning through entertainment and the consumption of media on this channel on a semi regular basis. I think that that's a nice, succinct way to sum that up. Um, so, here to provide a little bit of context here. So, this says more screen time leads to smaller vocabulary in children. Study finds. So, toddlers who spend more time on electronics could have worse vocabularies than children who spend less time, an Australian study has found. The observational study led by Telethon Kids Institute senior research officer Mary Brush found the average 3-year-old could miss out on 1,100 adult words, 840 vocalizations, and 194 conversations per day from spending time on screens. For the study, Fitbit-like devices were fitted onto children for over 2 years, measuring the amount of electronic noise and parent-child talk the child was exposed to over 2.5 years. So, is this the one that had? This is the one that had the news story, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so yeah, we'll check out this clip real quick because this sums it up.
From the makers of
That.
Tillamook presents Cheddar so tasty it inspired this too.
I can't stop double dipping.
And this is the one. This is the one tab where I forgot to run the ad first.
Hey, bro, it's all Gucci, bro. I need
Your
cheese
kids'
anyway.
screen time, there's no judgment here. Switching on the TV, iPad or phone can keep them entertained while you fire off a few emails or just get a few minutes peace to have a coffee or take a shower. But a study of 220 Aussie families has found the more screen time a child has, the fewer words they're exposed to. Researchers from the Telethon Kids Institute used Fitbit-like devices on children aged 1 to 3 years old to record their screen time use, as well as the number of interactions and conversations in the family home. Without telling their parents that's what they were measuring to get a more accurate result.
Our research showed that for just 1 minute of screen time, children were hearing 7 fewer adult words, they were saying 5 fewer words themselves, and engaging in 1 less back and forth conversation with their parent.
That means if a child were to watch an hour of screen time a day, they're missing out on around 400 words spoken by their parents and 300 of their own words and sounds. However, the average screen time for 3-year-olds in this study was closer to 3 hours a day. Let's face it, technology isn't going away, but researchers say there are ways to minimise the impact, like watching shows together and using them as conversation starters once devices are switched off.
Yeah, maybe if it was 1999.
Right, bro. Not happening.
Yeah. So yeah, this study. Yeah, so there's all of these. This study is basically showing children with lessening abilities to vocalize and maintain an extensive vocabulary, so on and so forth. I'm sure this comes as no surprise to you, but I'll let you expound upon your take on this particular story.
Yeah, man, I don't believe, like you mentioned, bro, I don't believe this as much as a surprise to anybody. But the great thing about it is that we have some empirical data now, at least from this study here, where as of recently, so they did the study for 2.5 years and came up with these numbers. The interesting thing about this, of course, they're children, so we're dealing with the development of the brain and talking and things of that nature, vocabulary. So that's great. But the one thing that I would like to do is extrapolate this study to just the human brain in general. And I think that the average adult is grabbing them a lot more than, 3 hours of screen time of television, phone, tablet, and whatever combined within a day. And I think what's going on here, what we've witnessed on the internet with bad grammar, a lot of short speak, like this is 1984, or we're witnessing the decline of brain, and people that's not really even having, basically people that are illiterate thinkers. And the reason why they don't have the ability to think is, I think, it's too many viewed hours, too many video games. Yeah, this has just become the way of life from people, is to unplug, unwind. First thing to do is turn on a device. So this is interesting to have a study that actually shows the atrophy that a child has for just having more screen time than a child who didn't. So I would argue that the same levels or the same type of mental atrophies happen to adults or adolescents, everything in between, if they spend a little bit too much time on these devices, which again speaks to how we mentioned, I mentioned it earlier about how the things that we consume also, mold our thoughts. Well, if it's also limiting your speech, because of limited vocabulary and these AI generated scripts they're writing nowadays, there's not really much that somebody can gain from this entertainment anymore. So I think with um, the declining quality of content that's being created, professionally, because independent small people still try to do their thing, but from the large corporations disseminating their stuff, we're not seeing the same levels of quality or dedication coming through with their entertainment. And I would say that for people who strictly indulge, or people who indulge a little bit more than they should in entertainment, is somehow, some way limiting themselves by engaging with these types of things. So I guess letter of a recommendation, man, because when I saw this, of course, again, it's pretty obvious that, get your kid off the tablet if you want to see them grow. But it's another thing to look at yourself in a way, like I did when I saw this, and said less screen time, more word time. So what about you, sir? What are your thoughts on this study showing that the more screen times minors have, and it's a significant number,
Yeah.
the lack of words that these kids have?
Yeah, those numbers did seem bit large. Like I'm not very familiar with studies of this nature, so I have nothing to compare it to. But just on the surface, they seemed kind of big. Those numbers. Yeah, this is not surprising to me at all. But it's also not new. I think with each evolution of technology, um, the adults who are already adults during the time when that evolution takes place, they are going to give birth to future generations of humans that become further neutered. So with each passing generation, there is a new iteration of neutering that is taking place.
Mhm.
So, like for us, I can't read a map. You know what I'm saying? Like if I need to, like if GPS went down and I was in the middle of the country and I need to find my way to the next state because I'm driving cross country, I'm gonna have to stop and ask somebody literally for directions, and they're gonna have to tell me road by road how to get to my destination, because without GPS, I'm dead. I can't read a map. So like my parents' generation had to understand roads and maps and signs. We didn't. We got the GPS thing. So I literally tell Siri where I need to go and she gets me there. Now, has that afforded me with a luxury that makes navigation easy? Sure, but has it neutered me as a human? Yes. Because if you take that technology away from me, I cannot give myself directions. So it's a pros and cons thing, and you have to evaluate whether the pro is worth the con in the event that the con rears its ugly head and you have to survive, right? So all of these technological advances are under the pretenses that we will never be in a scenario in which we were going to have to figure out how to survive without them.
Hmm.
But this is nothing new, because each iteration of new technology produces the next generation of neuter humans. So, smartphones ridded us of the need to understand how to navigate, how to read maps. We don't really need to be able to spell words anymore because we've been had Microsoft Office, which gave us spell check. We had all of these different things like spreadsheets and whatever. We can enter in formulas. So that takes computation out of the picture. We don't really need to know how to do you still like I literally had to sit down a couple days ago and create a long division problem on a piece of paper to see if I still remembered how to do long division. I had to do that because I would like to know that if we got hit with an EMP and I needed to do long like like if we got hit with an EMP and I needed to do long division on paper,
For whatever reason.
I have that skill. And
sure.
if it's a long enough equation, I might not be able to figure it out because I've forgotten it. I've atrophied myself mathematically and in terms of reading maps and all of this other stuff. So these new humans walking around out here, they're atrophied even further. They
Yeah.
use dating apps and other tools of that nature, further atrophying their social skills and their
Mhm.
personable skills. You
Mhm.
got men out here who don't know how to communicate with women in person because if they're not doing it on a phone when they can text everything, they don't know what they're actually doing. That's a form of social atrophy. We talk about social atrophy on this channel.
Mhm.
So this study on vocabulary is just another component of said neutering that we are willfully undergoing as a result of accepting all of these technologies. You get a Kindle, yeah, sure, you're still reading a book electronically, but the practice of being able to make notes and do highlights and flip pages,
Yeah.
and I know that you can do that to a certain degree with a Kindle or whatever, but there's an aspect of that traditionally that you're losing out on by not reading an actual book.
Yeah.
And so there are examples of this that are limitless. We can literally go down the list on this stuff. Vocabulary is just one of the many examples.
Mhm.
I get it. Even activity, physical exertion. I mean, kids a lot of the younger generations are replacing the hours that used to be spent doing actual physical activities on machines. What does that do for physical fitness and health? What does it do for nutrition? So
Mhm.
this thing runs deep. It's more than just vocabulary, although that is a part of it. But we have been seeing this now for, I would say, the last 30, 40 years. It accelerated in the mid 90s when the internet came along in 1995. We're the first generation to receive such a form of atrophy. I need to learn how to read a map. I do. I do need to know how. I want to be able to know that if I'm driving cross country and I do not have GPS, I don't have a signal, that I can whip out a map and get myself to my destination. Right now, I cannot do that. I can't. I can't. And that to me is a viable skill that humans benefit from more than not. So the vocabulary part is a part of it, but there's more and more and more of these things. And I do fear for the youth. Because if you take these things away from them, it's almost like they're a lemon. They can't do anything.
Mhm.
And the last thing that I'll say is I was pleasantly surprised to read a story. I don't know if you saw this,
Mm.
but I read this story. I thought about using it as a topic here, but apparently Bumble had to lay off 40% of its global workforce due to what they have seen is a decline in the use of dating apps among Gen Zers. So apparently, Gen Zers are moving away from dating apps, and the only people who are actually using them is us and people older than us, like Gen Xers. But it's
Mhm.
mostly millennials who use dating apps because Gen Zers are finding the impersonal nature of dating apps to actually be an impediment to successfully dating.
Oh,
I was
good.
pleasantly surprised by that. I was pleasantly surprised. So hopefully we see more examples of that because the more that we lean on device time, the more neutered we become, for sure.
I agree 1000%, man. Yeah, it is across the spectrum. My concern with vocabulary, because you're right, it's across the spectrum, but my concern with vocabulary is that it's so closely tied to behavior, And a lot of the stuff that we're witnessing right now is, the behavior of people. Not, people with big vocabularies do crazy stuff too. But what I noticed, especially growing up, the people that didn't have an extensive vocabulary got violent faster. They did other things. And my concern about this, long term, honestly, I already think we're witnessing the byproduct of, for sure, of this effect, just with regular internet, not with this tablet stuff. We'll see when the tablet babies hit the market. But yeah, it's a wild scene, man. I don't know what this is gonna spell for the future, no pun intended. But yeah, man, I don't like it, but it's good to hear a study that verifies, what you kind of already assumed anyway. So if anybody got some rigmarole to tell you, like, oh, that's just, hey, man, there's studies on this, man. Get your kid off of that garbage.
Yeah, at least monitor it or something for
Yeah,
sure.
monitor it, and limit
Yeah.
it for sure.
Yeah. No, man, you can't convince me. I don't think anyone with half a brain would disagree that it's having a tremendous effect.
Mm.
I just think with each generation we're becoming more and more neutered.
It's a good way of putting
And there is something to vocabulary too, because effective communicating, and I've mentioned this as well. That's a skill. And when you are devoid of that skill, you can't effectively communicate certain things. You can't effectively express what you got going on. It can lead to things like violent outbursts and things of that nature. I'm not saying that I'm not arguing causation in any kind of way,
right,
but I
right.
am arguing correlation for sure.
Yeah.
Because effective communication is a skill. It is, and it clearly is a skill that everyone doesn't possess in a tremendous amount of abundance. And so it stands to reason, if there was a greater emphasis on people developing their own personal communication skills, would there be less fringe behavior, I guess? And I think that that's a very valid question.
Yeah, fair.
Yeah, monitor that tablet time, man.
Yeah, but
unplug.
But y'all can hit like and subscribe.
Yes.
Watch as many hours over here. You know what I'm saying?